I visited the largest anechoic chamber in the world. This facility is nothing like you've seen before. The walls, ceilings, and floors are covered with more than 50,000 blocks of pyramid-shaped foams of various sizes. And if that doesn't tell you how humongous this facility is, the outside view should give you a much better idea. By the way, those two doors are the largest single-piece steel doors in the world. But what if I told you there is another building inside this building that turns it into a black hole of sorts? The security protocols at this facility are insane.
Hey! No filming!
Sorry.
No phones, no electronics, and we couldn't even take in our cameras to record. The only time I was left alone was when… never mind. But what is this place? The first thing that was built here was the foundation for a massive 80-foot turntable with underground tunnels that lead to it. And only after this building was put on top of it. They bring all sorts of military airplanes into this facility, while at the same time, this is where parts of the second Transformers movie was filmed. And they once even held a TEDx talk in here. But why everything that happens inside this building is linked to this ejection capsule? What happens when you blow the loudest whistle in the world inside the largest anechoic chamber on Earth? How 3 BMWs ended up inside this highly restricted military site? And why those massive doors are operated by a blender is not what you think. This is the Benefield Anechoic Facility, also known as the BAF. Pretty much every single model of aircraft in the US military inventory has spent some time inside the BAF, with the exception of 2 airplanes that would fit inside but couldn't get through the door. The C-5 Galaxy, due to its 223-foot wide wingspan, and Air Force One, because of its 63-foot high tail. Aside from airplanes and helicopters, satellites may also visit the BAF for a few weeks before they're launched into orbit. And on rare occasions, even cars have been spotted in this building. The only thing that hadn't made it here was balloons, but we changed that. And thanks to an authorized camera crew that met us on site, we could record what you're about to see. See, this being the largest anechoic chamber in the world, I'd come prepared with some props to put the no echo claim to the test. I was expecting something like the Action Labs video.
Here's a balloon pop in the anechoic chamber.
But what I got was quite a bit different.
Okay.
We repeated the experiment, but the results were the same. We even went to the corner of the chamber, which not only didn't get rid of the echo, but I also made a bit of a mess, and the crew had to step in to clean things up. This is supposedly the loudest whistle in the world.
We're gonna do the whistle.
Man, my ears are ringing.
And of course, I had to embarrass myself for science.
No!
It turns out this facility is not optimized to fully absorb sound waves, because the BAF is not an acoustic anechoic chamber. Inside an acoustic anechoic chamber, there are wedges. But over here at the BAF, you have pyramids, or as they call it, the RAM. Just compare the acoustic padding that I brought from my home studio versus the largest RAM in this building. This one absorbs sound waves. In contrast, this one absorbs electromagnetic waves. But how come all the wedges in an acoustic anechoic chamber are the same size and color, while the RAM in this building range in size from 18 inches to 6 feet tall and come in a variety of different colors? That answer has to do with the airplane that sits right outside the BAF, and even more specifically, with the ejection capsule that's right across the street. The BAF was built in the 1980s with one purpose: to perform a particular series of tests on one airplane, the B-1 Lancer, which is on permanent display outside the building. But what justified spending $52 million and 18 months of construction back in 1988 just to test one airplane? The answer is electromagnetic warfare, and here's why that was money well spent. The first step to shoot down any aircraft is to detect and identify it. This is done with the help of radars, which can then track the aircraft and ultimately relay that information to a missile platform to shoot it down. But an aircraft equipped with a radar warning receiver could detect that enemy radar and subsequently shoot an anti-radiation missile that would home in on the ground radar. Both the radar warning receiver and the anti-radiation missile are two forms of electronic warfare, or EW. You could also use EW to confuse a threat, but since we can't see radio frequency signals, I'll demonstrate this with something visual. Shining a really bright flashlight at someone who's chasing you can sometimes be enough to give you the opportunity to get away. EW is basically the use of electromagnetic waves in warfare, and that's been incorporated into various airplanes, including this one. The SR-71 Blackbird is probably one of the most fantasized about airplanes ever. A speed of Mach 3+, flying at 85,000 feet and never shot down. I loved seeing it up close, but I love wearing it on my wrist even more. This limited edition watch, called Habu, is built using real titanium from an actual SR-71 Blackbird, tail number 617956, not just inspired by the aircraft, made from it. That alone makes it one of the most unique timepieces I've ever owned. Cranking the crown, which is by the way shaped like the Blackbird's iconic dual-engine inlet cones, has become a satisfying daily ritual for me. The top dial draws directly from the Blackbird's exhaust flaps, and the lower dial is real titanium from the inner engine nacelle exhaust ejectors. The black and red FKM rubber straps resemble the body of the Blackbird, with the red no-step zones along the fuselage. Habu is bold, lightweight, and incredibly comfortable on the wrist. You're literally wearing Cold War-era aerospace engineering. If you geek out over the SR-71 like I do, this isn't just a watch. It's a physical link to one of the most advanced machines ever built. Titanium that once tore through the upper atmosphere at Mach 3+, now on your wrist. Now that's really cool. To get 10% off any of these limited edition watches, including pre-orders, click the link in the description and use the code NWYT. Just like the SR-71, the B-1 supersonic heavy bomber is packed with various EW systems, some offensive and some defensive. But before the B-1 could be used in combat, Rockwell had to ensure those systems worked as intended. Traditionally, to get realistic results, the aircraft would have had to fly numerous sorties while undergoing different experiments. But instead, Rockwell decided to replicate the open-air range indoors, which meant building a facility with two primary properties. First, it had to be electromagnetically quiet, shielded from outside interference. And second, it had to be non-reflective, so that signals wouldn't bounce off the walls. To accomplish this, Rockwell had to build a building inside another building. Once you go through the bath's main entrance, you'll notice there is a second building under the roof. This interior building is a Faraday cage. Here at the bath, the interior building provides 100 decibel of isolation for signals in the range of 10 MHz to 18 GHz. For context, each 10 decibel of isolation weakens the signal 10 times. So the 100 decibel isolation at the bath means that signals can in fact get through the walls, but only after a power reduction by a factor of 10 billion. Which means, in practice, the bath is a black hole for signals. But a Faraday cage doesn't just block signals from getting in. It also stops them from getting out, which is a good thing. Some of the systems tested inside the bath are top secret, so you don't want anything leaking outside. That said, the test signals on the inside will be bouncing off the walls, turning the whole room into an echo chamber and rendering the experiments useless. Which is why every inch of the bath is covered with radar-absorbent material, or RAM. These pyramids significantly increase the surface area of the room and help trap and dissipate signals by forcing them to reflect multiple times within the material. The RAM absorbs the energy of the signals in the form of heat. But why are some RAMs bigger and some smaller? The size of the RAM dictates its performance in different frequency ranges. Larger RAMs are better suited for lower frequency signals, which have long wavelengths. The smaller RAMs are better at absorbing high frequency, short wavelength signals. The color or coating of the RAM determines how much heat it can absorb. The blue RAMs are squishy. Don't worry, my fingerprints will go away. The chamber walls and ceilings are treated with a combination of medium and standard power RAM, which are blue. Although on the east wall, some of the RAM were specifically painted with the exact colors of the American flag, which measures at 36 by 26 feet. And see those red RAMs? Behind each one of those, there is a sprinkler head, which is activated in case there is a fire. The story is different on the floor, where standard and medium power RAMs are coated in black and purple respectively.
I mean, they squish a little bit.
The purple RAM was much harder than blue, but still had some give. That said, the black RAM was a different story.
Wow, these are hard. Yeah, can't really push them in.
And you could hear the difference too. The reason why the black RAMs are made so tough is because they're moved around the floor quite a bit, and sometimes even stacked. So they have to be able to withstand frequent handling. To further increase their lifespan, cardboard boxes are used as separators when stacking RAMs on top of each other. Each black RAM costs $500. And you might find it interesting to know that back in the 1980s, when the bath was being built in California, the RAM manufacturer was located on the east coast of the United States. Trucking the RAMs across the country would have been too expensive, so the manufacturer determined it was cheaper to build a manufacturing facility locally, close to the bath, and that's what they did. Today, the whole chamber is covered in roughly $2 million worth of radar-absorbent materials. The bath is located inside Edwards Air Force Base, which is not your typical airbase, considering that's where humanity broke Mach 1, Mach 2, Mach 3, and then within 1 year, with one airplane and one pilot, Mach 4, 5, and 6. But you'll be shocked to find out that most people who work here are actually civilians, even though the bath is operated and maintained by the 772nd Test Squadron, which is part of the 412th Electronic Warfare Group. And this is not limited to the bath. Civilians make up 70 to 80% of the workforce at Edwards Air Force Base. Strange, right? But if you know anything about the US military, you would have heard that personnel change roles or are moved around every 2 to 3 years. In contrast, the test programs that are conducted here at Edwards are multi-year initiatives. So by the time military personnel get up to speed and gain experience, they have to leave the test programs, which is not ideal. Civilians, on the other hand, don't have that problem and can stick around for decades. One of the camera crew, who was also a civilian, told me that his dream was to fly on military jets, and now he can do it for a living, without even being part of the Air Force. I thought that was cool. Once an airplane arrives at Edwards, there is a taxiway that leads directly into the bath. Right here. Take a guess how long it takes for the door to fully open or close. 40 minutes is the right answer, and for a good reason. If the door moved any faster, due to its sheer weight and momentum, it could shatter the end of its storage housing. So the motor used to operate the door only has 3/4 of a horsepower, comparable to a simple household appliance. Once the door is open, the aircraft is towed to the center of the chamber and parked in the middle of the 80-foot turntable, where it would sit for days or weeks. The turntable is here for two primary reasons. First, the antennas and electronic systems must be tested from different angles to ensure consistent performance no matter the aircraft's orientation. But instead of running some tests, then moving the emitters and repeating the tests from a different angle, the turntable allows the emitters and sensors to remain fixed and instead turn the aircraft. This not only saves time, but it also increases the accuracy. That's because the turntable can rotate with a precision of 0.05 degrees. It's a smooth ride, but it's quite loud. Under the turntable, there are a bunch of cables and systems, which can be used via these access panels on the top.
Another type of cooling. Then there's power outlets, these 20 amps, 30 amps.
A super fancy tool is needed to remove the cover on the access panels. Right above the turntable, there is also a hoist that can pick up anything weighing up to 40 tons. Just like the turntable, it also moves really slowly. But what's the benefit of lifting fighter jets and helicopters into the air? Anechoic chambers are not perfect, meaning that they don't absorb 100% of the signals. But they absorb enough that any weak reflections that do bounce back to the aircraft are indistinguishable from background noise. That said, right in the middle of the chamber, about 35 feet off the ground, is the quietest area in the room with the least amount of reflection. So it provides the best anechoic performance and therefore the best results. Plus, since an airplane receives most of its radiation from below, lifting it in the air makes for a more realistic environment. And the aircraft can still be rotated by connecting it to the turntable with tensioned cables. Any new airplanes like the B-21 Raider or existing aircraft with new upgrades come to the BAF primarily for three major test categories. First is electromagnetic interference and compatibility.
The aircraft isn't interfering with itself because we're going to turn on one system on the aircraft, another system could be listening. We don't want those conflicting with each other.
Second is antenna pattern testing, measuring and mapping radiation patterns from aircraft antenna to see how well it can transmit and receive signals in all directions. And finally, radar warning receiver testing, which simulates threats to evaluate aircraft responses and jamming capabilities. Performing these experiments indoors is a huge time and money saver. For instance, the United Kingdom completed 3 years' worth of flight testing inside the BAF in just 1 month. Of course, Rockwell opened this facility in 1989 with the sole purpose of testing the B-1B bomber. And once they were done, they had no need to keep the facility. Thankfully, the Air Force took it over, and the rest is history. But that history was shaped by tragedy. 5 years earlier, during a B-1 prototype flight test, the crew was forced to eject. This is the very same ejection capsule from that incident. Unfortunately, test pilot Tommy Douglas Benefield didn't survive the crash. Rockwell named this facility after Tommy Benefield, in honor of his sacrifice. Not everything that comes to the BAF is as large as a B-52 bomber. Other, smaller pieces of equipment also require electromagnetic interference testing. But tying up the bath's massive chamber just to test small radio equipment is an overkill. That's why the bath has a baby. Right around the corner, there's a small anechoic chamber nicknamed Baby Bath. It's the size of a large bedroom, but essentially allows for similar testing that happens inside the main chamber. But those customers who need the big chamber at the bath must typically get in line about 18 months in advance for a series of tests that may take only 3 weeks to complete. Under the National Defense Authorization Act, a DoD customer, say the Air Force, only pays for labor. But a non-sponsored client, like BMW, would pay for both labor and the use of the facility. But why would BMW have to come to the bath instead of going to a smaller and cheaper anechoic chamber? In 2003, BMW needed to test for interference between the XM radio and the GPS that was built into their then upcoming 2004 models of the 530i, 545i, and debut model 645i. The legend has it that some engineers who worked at the bath were huge BMW fans, and so they were the ones who wanted these upcoming models to come to the bath so they could check them out. The electromagnetic interference testing was just their excuse to test drive the Beamers. A big thank you to Edwards Air Force Base and the team at the bath for accommodating our visit and letting us be the first to do such unorthodox experiments.
It's not what you think!